Welcome to Aletheia Bible Fellowship. Today's sermon is to continue our series on the parent-child relationship, specifically what it takes to be a caregiver. And we're dealing with the subject of rebellion, so what it is that causes rebellion and what to do with a rebellious child as well. So if you need any further information or have questions about this or any of our other sermons, you can find out more information at our website at abfpdx.org.
All right, so today I'm going to continue to talk about parenting. And I just want to once again remind you that we do have the parenting classes. The last one was yesterday, and it was a good thing. It was a really, really good opportunity. If you missed that, however, that wasn't your only chance because it is available through our YouTube channel. And I highly recommend that you listen, even if you're not a parent, it's a good idea. As I've been talking about this whole month, just because you're not a parent doesn't mean that there are not children or others that you are in some capacity being looked to as their parent. God has a way of putting people in our lives that help to fulfill those roles. If the biological parents that we have do not step up, or if there's a particular area that they're not strong in, God introduces us and takes care of us with others that can provide those things to us. I can think of many examples in my life, and I can't continue when I do that because I start tearing up and my voice starts to crack. And then my wife gets on my case because I didn't bring my handkerchief. So, God will provide in you the opportunity for you to speak into someone else's life as a parent. So even if you don't have children now, I do recommend, especially since you're part of our family here, and we partner with parents to help bring children along, that you view those parenting classes that are available through our YouTube site. And for our part on Sunday, the sermons this month have been focusing specifically on bringing us together in solidarity, looking at the parent-child relationship specifically as a caregiver and what that looks like. We discussed the importance overall of parenting, not just in the church, but how it affects society as a whole. When we look around us in the world and we see how the climate has changed, we see how it is that people react to the slightest things, how people are choosing to be offended at things that years ago they would have not taken any offense to. How it is that we have a victim mentality in some cases where everything is out to get us. Those types of attitudes all stem from a lack of a proper, cohesive family around us, a lack of parenting that is based on a proper flow of authority that starts with God, then to the father and mother, and to the partner, which in our case would be the church that God has provided for us, the people that He has brought together here to work with us. So when we talked last week, we talked about exasperation and the direction for fathers to avoid bringing up children in that kind of environment. And today I want to talk about something that kind of continues along that same vein. Exasperated children do have a tendency to act out and to be rebellious. There we go, I said it properly that time. So today we're going to actually talk a little bit about that rebelliousness. Last week we looked at the story of Absalom and the aspects of David's fathering of him that went into the formation of a full-out rebellion on like a huge scale. I have in my notes a mega scale because it's pretty big. Absalom raised up his own army against his father. He chased his father from the throne, and in probably the most obvious open rebellion against his father, slept with his father's concubines. He was showing his authority in the situation because his father did not take authority in the situation. And there were a number of things that bled into that, right? It's not just one day Absalom woke up and he decided, I don't like you, Dad. I'm going to take your throne. There were a number of factors that were there. Now remember, you can look in 2 Samuel and you can read through 2 Samuel and see more of the particulars. I'm not going to read for you verbatim because, I don't want to be preaching for 3 hours today. And at some point I might lose you. So I encourage you to delve into the word yourself and look at the story of Absalom in 2 Samuel. We want to start by acknowledging the fact that we probably are not going to have a full-on Absalom type situation for us. First of all, unless I'm missing something, we're not kings of a country. No, not royalty. We don't have a son that is the prince of two different countries, our own country and the country that we formed an alliance with. But we do have children, and we do have opportunity in how we bring children up to, to allow rebellion to grow. And you're probably thinking of like maybe a wild child or something like that that just never seems to listen to what it is, but that's not always the case. We're not dealing necessarily just with them, because there are little small ways that a child will flex out of the boundaries that you have set for them. They will test them and test you to see how it is that you respond and what that response will be fully, and if that response is consistent. Some children, after testing once or twice, will stop there, realizing that you are consistent, and then move forward from that, not to test again. But there are children that possess a naturally strong-willed personality that some might characterize as rebellious. I would ask you to refrain from doing that. Because even that child that would question things more, that would be what you would consider strong-willed, that would have that attitude of seeking out more information, is not really rebellious at that point. They're just looking to be more informed. They're testing the limits. The strong-willed child are very intelligent and can figure out situations with amazing speed. And they can find ways to take control of circumstances and people around them. But this does not mean that they are rebellious. This means they are seeking to explore and to find out what their capabilities are, what it is that they can do, how it is that they operate within the world. If they can't do that within the family unit, where else is a safe place for that to take place? So just because you have a child that questions things, that figures things out fast, that maybe even puts a unique spin on the rules that you have laid down, it doesn't mean that they're rebellious. It does mean that they can quite quickly turn rebellious if you're not consistent with them, however. But let me be perfectly clear, there is no particular personality that is destined to actually be rebellious. You can't look at a child and say, oh, they're going to be a rebel when they grow up. Because sometimes, if you were looking for just those specific signs, you're going to miss those quiet ones that just sit and they bide their time until it's just right to strike. You got to be careful about those quiet ones because they're unpredictable. See, the strong-willed child that lets you know right then and there that they're questioning stuff You know what they're about. There's no guessing. But the quiet ones, something's going on. They're just not showing it outward. So there is no particular style of child, particular attitude that a child has, particular personality that you could point to immediately say, they're going to be a rebel. It is dangerous for you to label somebody with a questioning spirit or even a quiet spirit as a rebel. Because quite honestly, it partially has to do with how it is that you react, how it is that you act, the influence that not only you have on your children, but those that are partnering with you in parenting your children. All of these influencers are going to come together and they're going to push one way or the other. So it all starts out when they're very young. It starts out with their social circle. Who it is that they spend time with. Who it is that you put them in the path of. Who it is that has an influence. It is often the case, unfortunately, that we lose our children because we enroll them into a daycare or a preschool or first grade and think that we have passed off responsibility. We have done our part because we started them on the path of education, and now the teachers will take care of things. The teachers will police their social interactions. The teachers will teach them their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. It's no longer our responsibility to do that. If you think that you've passed off part of your responsibility as a parent by sending them to a public institution for them to be educated, you're very sorely mistaken. You've given them an open field for indoctrination without your supervision at all. Now, I'm not giving a treatise against public schools. I'm not giving a call for homeschooling. But I'm saying that you, as a parent, cannot pass the buck that way. These children are our responsibility. I don't know why that came out weird, but they're still our responsibility. We need to be involved in those aspects of their lives. We have a call to be involved from a young age to determine who these young people are going to be around, the type of influence that other peoples will be allowed to have on them. And we have a duty to inform them about the truth of who God is in every single interaction that they have. It's not just something that we do when you're at home. It's not just something that we do on Sunday when we go to church. It's not enough for your Sunday school teacher to teach you about the story of Absalom. These things need to be taught in the home. It cannot be passed off. The best thing is to ground them in a community of faith and work with them, the community of faith, to help, to influence whom they associate with, the qualities that they look for in people that they partner with. You set them up for success by showing them what success looks like. You set them up for success by showing them that in all interactions, God is primary. You teach them to think logically through the choices that they'll be presented with each encounter, and you teach them to look for consistency in the messages that they receive. Children crave order. I know it may not seem that way sometimes, but they crave order. Now, I say that and we'll have some chaotic playing out on the play structure or something like that, and it'll seem like it's chaos to us. But even as they do that, they create rules themselves. Because children crave order and direction. They're completely lost unless they have opportunity to flex within boundaries that you set, and even to set boundaries themselves based off of the standard that you have shown them. So we must teach them to look for the consistency in the message they receive. For the child who exhibits a rebellious streak may be doing so for a variety of reasons. If they've been treated harsh or unloving, if critical parenting, those types of things will always result in a rebellion of some sort. The opportunity for us to be overbearing in how we raise them, how it is that we discipline them, the rules that we lay down for them, become, instead of a guideline for them, shackles that they look to break free from. That almost always results in a child that they will rebel from their parents, simply because they've been stripped of any power that they have in the relationship. See, our job as parents is not to make our kids feel powerless. It's not to exert our authority. It's to teach them proper submission to authority. And proper submission to authority doesn't come at the end of a fist. It comes through a humble heart. It comes through control of the power that you have. No matter what style of parenting a family embraces, there's always that possibility that a child might rebel. We are human. Well, I am. I'm pretty sure all of you are too. I can smell a burnt resistor, so be warned if you're not. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. I know I myself have made mistakes. I have grown children. 25-year-olds, that's pretty grown, right? 15-year-old, they're still alive. They know who God is. I made some mistakes. But praise God, there's a proper flow of authority in the structure of our household. And where I may have dropped the ball, others came along and they partnered and they helped. And they provided not only correction for my children, but correction for me, so that I too may be built up. So that in my children's eyes, I'm not diminished, but they can see that I too am struggling. And then they get the message and they understand that they may not be perfect either. It's a good experience for children to see your weaknesses properly addressed, to see your struggles properly worked through. I'm not talking about burdening them with the issues that you have. We're not putting it on their shoulders and saying, well, I'm messed up, so now you have to take care of this. But proper communication, proper working through things, not hiding things behind closed doors. You think that you're having an argument with your spouse behind closed doors, but I guarantee you your children know what is going on. You might as well be having it right out in front of them. We grow up in a society where we think that we need to project this perfect image. Especially as Christians, right? We have to show up in our Sunday best. I say that and my shirt's not even tucked in, guys. I'm wearing tennis shoes. We think that we need to project this image that our family has no issues. And then when we go home on Sunday, we delve right into them. And it starts with, what should we do for lunch? Hey, I've lived it. I know that's one of the biggest fights. Sunday evening sucked. Sunday morning, praise God. But those are the type of pressures that we put on our children when we teach them that this is how we act at church and this is how we act in real life. This is our home life. This is how you're going to deal with things. We need to be real with them, but not burden them with our burdens. We don't want them to have to be more mature than they should be. They shouldn't need to take over our tasks because we fail to take them on. Remember, we're given a directive. We've read through it many times before. Proverbs 22, verse 6. It says, direct your children onto the right path, and when they were older, they will not leave it. For all children, the way they should go forward is towards God in everything. Teaching children in God's word is crucial for all of them. They must understand who God is and how best to serve him, and must understand that he, God, has all things in his hands, that he is sovereign. This gives them a stable and firm foundation for every single interaction they have, because they know that when they go out into the world, they don't need to be afraid. They are in God's hands. And we teach them to be cautious and to think logically about things. We teach them to weigh one thing against another, to weigh the information they receive from others outside of our control in interactions out there in the big wide world with what it is that they received from us and from our parenting partners in the church, and to see if the truths they're presented with match up to the truths that they learned in their youth. But if we never go beyond forcing Scripture down their throats, and they never learn the meaning of the words and the why it is that we do these things, and we never engage their minds so they think logically about it, they're not going to be equipped to be able to weigh accurately. And this is when they rebel. Because they never understood a true personal relationship of their own with God. They learned a relationship through their parents. The foundation must be laid with a proper flow of authority. The parents must establish in the child's mind that they themselves are in submission to God. There's no weakness in that. A child can spot any time that we're indecisive. They can spot any time we're inconsistent. They begin to learn through this to take control themselves, and they start to subvert that proper flow of authority towards themselves. And without a proper understanding of submitting to authority, if it's not learned in childhood, it becomes very difficult to learn when you're older. The future will be characterized by conflicts with all types of authorities, with employers, police, laws, courts, military leaders, government officials. Talked about this at the beginning of the month. We have examples all around us of this very type of thing. People who have issues with authority because they were never taught what authority actually looks like, and they were never taught that all authority is under God. They haven't been taught that he is sovereign even in those relationships. Romans 13, 1 through 5 is very clear that authorities over us are established by God, and we are to submit to them. It says, everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in position of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of the authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. The authorities are God's servant, sent for your good. But if you were doing wrong, of course, you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent to the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them not only to avoid punishment, but also to keep a clear conscience. A child will only willingly comply with rules and laws when they make sense to them, when they understand where they stand with them. So if you are going to lay down hard and fast rules, be prepared to give a solid reason for the rule. Whenever possible, give the child opportunities to help make decisions so that they do not feel completely powerless. Allow them to participate in setting the boundaries with you. This doesn't give the child control to do that, because there are still overriding factors, but it gives them the opportunity to exercise their brains in making decisions that are beneficial for them and dealing with the consequences of those decisions. These things lay a foundation that it's hard to leave, per our reading in Proverbs. Now, I know you may have heard this, right? Well, I don't want to force religion. I don't want to indoctrinate. They're too young for church. I want them to make their own decisions. I'll give them the freedom I'll pray for them, for God's timing, that they'll be saved. This is not what the Bible tells us to do. It's the exact opposite, in fact. The problem that we encounter with people in their teenage years stems primarily from lack or careless parenting, who leave things up to chance. A solid prayer with no action on your part is an empty prayer. Remember, just because we may grow up with Christian parents does not mean that we will be Christian children. Children are born sinful. They are born unsaved. And they must be taught about the possibility of being reunited with God through Christ. And we must teach them to have a relationship with God early in life. So don't just teach them to say their prayers. Teach them to talk to God. Why it is that they're talking to God. Why it is that they should pray. Show them what loving God looks like early in their development, so that the foundation will be strong when they are outside of our care and in somebody else's. Now, even if you do everything with these principles in mind, you may end up with a child that, as they grow into teenage year, they rebel against authority and embrace different ideals. If you have a rebellious child, you know that heartache of rebellion. You know the pain and frustration of watching the child ignore good wisdom and take a self-destructive path. Remember, our children should be armed with the armor and tools they need to be able to make correct choices. But unfortunately, as I shared previously, 66% abandon the faith of their parents when they go off to college. That's a large amount. So why are the young people leaving? Why are they rebelling against the Christianity of their parents? The answer is basically kind of twofold. Some of the departing adult children were never really believers in the first place. They never developed their own personal relationship with God. Dr. Frank Turek, president of crossexamine.org, makes a point about this. He says, while there are notable exceptions, most American churches overemphasize emotion and ignore the biblical command in developing the mind that you see in 1 Peter 3 and in 2 Corinthians 10. In other words, we're doing a great job of performing for the youth with skits and bands and videos, but a terrible job informing them with logic and truth and a Christian worldview. We've failed to recognize that what we win with them, we win them too. So if we win them with emotion, we have won them to emotion. So if we present an emotional religion instead of a credible biblical Christianity, then we've won them to an emotional religion instead of the God of the Bible. And this means that there's this push to find that emotional pull somewhere else. Because that's all they received. And when we seek unbelievers to fill the seats and attend our churches, to get them to come regularly, the actual gospel message where God is just and he judges sin and Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. Instead, we compromise that because the world hates that message and the unbelievers would not come to our church. So they never become believers. They leave when they get older because the emotion that they came for is no longer sufficient for them. So they're off for the next emotional high. See, we must teach our children to be thinking with their minds, to be engaged, to be sober-minded and active in any engagement. To not mindlessly look through a television show, to watch YouTube or TikTok or movies without an engaged mind. Weighing what is incoming with the truth and foundation that has been laid. And the communities we involve them with and join together in solidarity and partner with must show them a living and breathing word, not something that is dead. Not a placation. Not something we only do on Sundays. So as you think about that, I want to revisit the parable that we looked at last week that painted a picture, of exasperation. But I want to look at it more than just the Sunday school version of it. I want to look again at the parable of the prodigal son. So in Luke chapter 15, verse 11, Jesus starts out and he says, "A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that is coming to me.' And so he divided his wealth between them." I want to stop just there for a second. You've probably heard that and you're like, okay, so the son came and said, "Hey, give me all the money that I'm supposed to have." But I want you to think about what he's really saying to his father. You need to look into the context and you need to understand that when you get your inheritance, it means that most likely your father has died. And this was the younger son. He wasn't expecting a full inheritance. He was expecting his smaller portion of 1/3 of it. So basically what he came to his father was and said, "I wish you were dead so I can have the money." Wow. He says to his dad, "I wish you were dead so I can have the money that's coming as my inheritance." And then on top of that, he took the money and he removed it completely from anything attached to his father. You see, an inheritance is supposed to help to carry on the legacy of the family. The younger son said, "No. I'm going to liquidate all the assets and any ties that I have to my family, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to throw some great parties, man. I'm going to just blow everything on the best I can get, fast living, and fun parties." The rebel on the run is the younger son. His rebellion is outward. How many of you would dare to go up to your father and say, drop dead? I want to get on with my life. Hopefully none of us would do this. But it's exactly what this son said to his father when he demanded his father give him the inheritance right then and there. If you put into the context of who Jesus is speaking to. He wants nothing to do with his father and only desires to live a life that is disconnected. The rebel is like one who has turned his back on God and said, I'm doing things my way. I'm going to live as if you don't exist. Completely disconnected. Now, you can remember that the family evidently has been very consistent in how they have treated not just him, but everyone, including the servants, so that even when this rebellious young man, in his outward rebellion, rejected the family values and departed from their ways, he remembered them still. And when he had exhausted himself and he had come to his senses, realizing just what he had wrought upon himself, when he had dealt with the consequences and taken hold of them and was repentant of his action, he remembered that his father's servants were even treated better than what he was experiencing. And he was ready to face his father and beg to be a servant. And his father's response was to remind him, despite your actions, you are my son. Despite your outward rebellion, I never let you go. But that's not the only story of rebellion that is here. The older brother who stayed, he looks at his relationship with his father based on legal terms and performance, and he sees himself as only a slave to his father. Resentment comes from the comparison that he makes between himself and his younger brother. Look what I've done compared to what he did. It's not fair. He claims to have never broken the command that his father gave him, and yet he's not showing his father honor. All because he's accusing his father of favoritism, because he never got a goat to celebrate with his friends. When we only focus on ourselves and compare ourselves with others, the sin of resentment will fill our hearts. And so it may not be an outward rebellion like the younger son, it may be an inner rebellion like the older son. And we may destroy relationship based off comparison instead of our own relationship with the Father. See, in this parable, Christ gives us a glimpse of how it is that we are to, that we ourselves were handled, right? How it was that we should handle rebellion as well. So the father's agony begins when he first realized that he had to let his younger son go. And he didn't want to, but he knew that it was something that he needed to let his son go through. He knew that he could have spared his boy the heartache and the loneliness and the shame and degradation if the boy had only been more patient, had waited, and allowed his father to work out his full purpose. He could have brought him into a full enjoyment of all the liberty it is that he sought. But the father also knew that he couldn't do it without the boy's full cooperation. He couldn't bring him kicking and screaming through that time. The boy would have to agree to wait through the fulfillment of the father's plans. But if he could not wait, the father could not force him to and could not make him do it. So with his heart breaking, the father gave the boy the money and let him go. And then there were months, there were years, reports probably came filtering back about what was happening. The older boy that stayed probably heard them and threw them in his father's face. Everything was a knife that could be used to attack the father's heart. So as parents, we can look to this example and wait for that pain in our own hearts. But we must know that God is sovereign in all of these things. We pray and we hold on to truth and we stand our ground and we allow the consequences to come to bear, even though it hurts. But we must stick to accountability. We must stick to consistency. We must stick to the firm foundation of a relationship with God. We must seep our relationship with the knowledge of God and who He is and teach His love and discipline, just as it says in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11 and 12. My child, do not reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when He corrects you, for the Lord corrects those that He loves, just as a father corrects the child with whom he has delight. So if we build a parenting strategy that's based on God's legacy, and we carry out that strategy in submission to God as the head of our family, we can intervene in our child's life with biblical principles and debrief those with them and review them to see the successes and opportunities for growth. This all sets us on the right path for our interactions and help us to train our children how to put things into proper perspective. And we involve them so that they grow strong for their own understanding and engage their whole self. And they don't just give lip service to their relationships in church. So they have a real relationship. They don't just go to church because their parents made them. So it's not so easy to abandon when they leave their parents' care. The church must be a partner with the family unit, not a punishment. Our own actions should not draw them away from the community of faith. We should teach them to think in relationship and not just follow in relationship. So there's hope for the rebellious child. There's hope for you if you're the parent of a rebellious child. Remember first and foremost that God is sovereign and nothing is outside of His power. So today I do have a few questions for you as we break into cell groups. Just to start conversation, to be thinking of things in this light. First question I would like you to ponder is, what influence do you have on your children? What influence do you have on your children? Now remember, if you yourself do not have a child, there are children that you probably have some influence over. So ask yourself exactly what influences that you have. And then the second question is, what relationships in your life suffer from rebellion? What relationships in your life suffer from rebellion? And then the third question, how have you sought to repair those rebellious relationships? Where have you started? What steps have you taken? How have you sought to repair those rebellious relationships? So we'll take opportunity to discuss this, and next week we're going to talk about what it looks like when we're ready to pass on that care. But for today, think about rebellion, think about what it stems from, and think about putting things into proper perspective. Go with God.